Are you ready for the next pandemic? Interesting question, right? They suggest that it's out there. The experts are saying that any time in any given year, there's a 2 to 3% probability there could be a pandemic. So let's take a look at that and maybe what we can do about it. And how about this warning from the World Health Organization? Future pathogens could be even more deadly. Yeah, they're getting better at engineering those. Now we just got to keep them under control. So I'm Dr. Bob Rakowski, over 3 decades in clinical practice, clinical experience from elite professional athletes from literally every sport to the other end of the spectrum, the critically ill. And I've also traveled to 6 different continents, teaching over 10,000 hours of nutrition, functional medicine seminars to doctors all over the world. So let's talk about, first and foremost, what is a pandemic? Where do they come from? What's the probability of you dying from COVID or some other pandemic? If you're watching this, obviously you didn't die from COVID. How do pandemics naturally resolve? They've been around since the beginning of humankind. Where will the next one come from? And then finally, what can you do to stay safe? So when you start looking at pandemic, basically it's something that is spread all over the entire world. Endemic is something that's already existent, like a common cold. We might even call COVID-19 endemic. Epidemic is a region that is having some type of breakout. But pandemics tend to come from animals. Think about it. Viruses are always mutating. There's a lot more animals than there are humans on the planet. And there's actually estimated that there are 10 quintillion viruses. Try to wrap your head around that for a moment. But somehow the virus mutates where it no longer just affects an animal, but it can affect a human. So the Spanish flu came actually from chickens. The Asian flu actually also came from chickens. The Hong Kong flu from chickens. The swine flu, obviously, from swines. And then what about COVID-19? Did it come from a bat? Well, maybe the original COVID virus did, but there's plenty of evidence that this was actually messed with in a lab. When we start looking at the Black Plague, Yersinia pestis, yeah, that was a zoonotic spillover, basically fleas on rats. So what caused the Black Death, Black Plague? How about garbage and waste in the streets that led to a lot of rats, that led to people encountering the rats and then the virus on the fleas. So did they make the coronavirus? Well, we don't really know. The Wuhan Institute of Virology certainly will be investigated for that. Don't know how honest they'll be. But I asked AI, what were the top 10 global pandemics of all time? And notice 3 of them were the Black Plague in different periods of time. So rats with fleas. Then we had a swine flu, a bird flu, multiple bird flus. Rats generated. The only one that didn't show was actually cholera, which was from contaminated water. So remember Fauci, right? Scaring us every single day. Hey, don't just wear one mask, wear 2 masks. And by the way, we knew that was kind of worthless, right? But they're constantly selling fear. And how about this? Peter Hotez, look at this guy, certainly not the picture of health. His child has autism. He wrote a book about how the child's autism did not come from vaccines. I have seen, I promise you, well over 50 parents who were all positive that their child, declined so severely after a shot, like it was the next day. They weren't the same person. And our government so far has paid out like $5 billion in vaccine injuries. So I'll be very, very curious to look at that. But keep in mind, they were saying, hey, they're our CDC. Can you trust them? Maybe you can now. But they were saying, you know what, wear masks indoors. It doesn't matter if you're vaccinated, whatever, wear a mask indoors. So this is death rate from infectious disease the entire last century. And you realize that 80% of deaths around 1900 were from infectious disease. And then you look forward, there was a 75% reduction in death rate from infectious disease before penicillin, over 90% before antibiotics, and essentially, before widespread vaccines, and no drop since. So how do we get rid of this infectious disease issue? Well, pandemics dissolve through herd immunity. I went out early in 2020 and got COVID because I was promoting herd immunity. By the way, I also know that convalescent plasma, if you take the fluid from blood from people that have had COVID and infuse it into people that are fighting it, they have a better chance of beating it. Public health interventions, well, certainly getting healthy, I would suggest, would be the best public health intervention. But they talk about washing your hands and using restrooms rather than eliminating in the streets. Treatments, both natural and pharmaceutical, can help. And in fact, I'll share with you, they actually suggest a death rate from the Spanish flu with modern technology, modern science, modern nutrition, modern medicine. And it's just a tiny fraction of what it once was. There's a natural decline. Organisms become less deadly. Why? Because if you kill your host, you kill yourself. And then finally, there's changes in the population and the environment. Maybe we clean up the environment and thin the herd from weak people in the population. So, Fauci, hey, are we on the verge of another pandemic? How did he know about the last one? Isn't that interesting? No one can predict anything, but he sure had that one right. Makes you wonder if he had some inside information. But yeah, 2 to 3% probability any given year. So maybe the most important question, how can you stay safe? So here's what I asked AI about the Spanish flu. I asked it about COVID-19. So if someone was under the age of 80 and healthy, in other words, no comorbidities, they weren't obese, they weren't hypertensive, they weren't diabetic, they weren't alcoholic, what was the probability that if you would die if you were under the age of 80? 5 to 10 per million people. Think about that. So if we have 300 million people, we might have had 1,500 deaths or maybe 3,000 deaths in the US. And keep in mind, the reason we had so many deaths was we're just not healthy. So reminds me of my first law, healthy bodies don't get sick. And I asked AI, well, the Spanish flu, with today's technology, today's information, how many people would die? Well, 75% to 90% less is what AI estimates. And here's what I'll tell you. If we took all these people, kept them really, really healthy and were proactive, I bet we could do better than that. So you start looking at HIV. I'm very, very grateful that medical science has made some advancements in this. Magic Johnson, I think it was 1991, he was diagnosed. So that's a while ago. That was 34 years ago. And here's what they say. If a 30-year-old is diagnosed with HIV today, they can expect to live to between 76 and 78 years. So medical therapeutics, antivirals have gotten very, very powerful. And I'll mention this a few times. Ganoderma lucidum, you can type in this PubMed ID, can actually inhibit the HIV virus. And we're going to find out that that is one of the body's best defenses. There's lots of ways to inhibit viruses. The body has a lot of ways of doing that. And then there's Joe Rogan. So interesting how this came about. He got COVID. I think he was over it in 5 days completely, from first symptom to being over it. So he blended the best of medicine and natural medicine. Monoclonal antibodies, those were effective. Ivermectin, they didn't know it at the time. Joe did. Azithromycin, that's an antibiotic to prevent a secondary infection. Prednisone, that would reduce lung infections. NAD, that's getting a lot of press. That's a powerful nutrient derived from the vitamin B3, niacin. And then finally, he did high-dose vitamin infusions, high-dose vitamin C infusions. And I have to wonder if we use that as a strategy, maybe not the monoclonal antibodies, for most viruses, I wonder how quickly we'd get rid of them. So what are the 3 ways that the body can deal with a virus? Number one, there's viral proliferation. So ultimately, we want to stop it. We want to stop it from multiplying within the body. Then there's an inflammatory or cytokine injury. And then the extreme is you could throw a blood clot, and if it's in the wrong place, it could absolutely kill you. So if you get a clot in your leg, deep vein thrombosis, that can actually go to the lungs, causing pulmonary embolism. And about half the time, that's fatal. So don't take chances with blood clots. So I asked AI, how do we stop viral replication with nutrients? Ganoderma, quercetin, curcumin, zinc, vitamin D, N-acetylcysteine, and then green tea has epicatechin gallate, EGCG. So Very, very good nutrients to do that. What if you had all seven on board if you were fighting a virus? Well, how do we combat the cytokine storm? How about vitamin D? How about omega 3 fats? How about zinc? How about vitamin C? How about curcumin? And Ganoderma lucidum as well. So I show that little blow up there of those charts there, and we look at Ganoderma lucidum, and we do find that it modulates tumor necrosis factor alpha and interferon gamma. So very, very powerful. So those are our ways to prevent cytokine storm. And by the way, there's the PubMed Ganoderma, very, very powerful at combating the cytokine storm. And vitamin D. There were plenty of studies that showed that your vitamin D status could predict whether or not you would survive COVID. The better your vitamin D, the better your survivability. But many things can stop the cytokine storm. And then finally, what about blood clots? There's vitamin D again, omega 3 fats again, vitamin E, K2, magnesium, and Ganoderma didn't make it with AI, but it certainly does it. So Ganoderma contains a number of fibrinolytic proteases that are designed to dissolve blood clots. And the beautiful thing about Ganoderma is it prevents abnormal clotting without promoting abnormal bleeding. So, what are the big three that prevent all levels, whether we're talking about viral replication, cytokine progression? We don't ever want to get to storm or even clotting. The big three are going to be Ganoderma, vitamin D, and omega 3s. And these are things that I absolutely recommend that people take every single day. You want a high quality vitamin D. I prefer D3K2. In fact, the literature says that's the best way to do it. 10,000 international units a day. Omega 3, at least a gram a day. I prefer the resolving form of it. And then Ganoderma, my favorite way is to get it in coffee and tea. So Paul Stamets, nicknamed Mushroom Man, he's got a TED Talk, 6 Ways That Mushrooms Will Save the World. Here's what he found out very, very simply. The Defense Department said, hey, you should study these mushrooms and see if there could be a defense against bioterrorism, like an attack from smallpox. You can still listen to that interview. Very, very powerful. But yes, mushrooms can block replication of the smallpox virus. Ganoderma was proven early on to be very effective against the COVID virus. And here's what they found out. You could increase survivability nearly 28x if you gave very, very sick people in the hospital, not just Western medicine, some of that was probably needed and good, but also traditional Chinese medicine, of which Ganoderma lucidum is the top tool in traditional Chinese medicine. So how do I like Ganoderma? How about in coffee or tea? How about the world's best organic coffee in the world? Go to bettercoffeeshop.com. Try our 1-box challenge. I offer it with 100% money back guarantee. So a pandemic is something that is spreading an infectious disease all over the world. They tend to come from animals with a viral mutation. Keep in mind that's possible because there are 10 quintillion viruses out there. If you take good care of yourself, I'm going to tell you what, your probability of dying from infectious disease is very, very low. I mean, we've got things like MRSA, where we actually know there's things like that's antibiotic resistant, methicillin resistant Staph aureus. That's the technical name of it. Ganoderma can help that. Vitamin infusions can help that. Maybe ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine can help with that as well. But the more we know, the better we take care of ourselves, the less probability we have of dying of anything, especially infectious disease. So how do pandemics resolve? Enough healthy people beat it to create herd immunity. And that's always the solution. Where will the next one come from? Likely animals. How do you stay safe? Take your good nutrients, or as I like to say, do everything right. Eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right every single day. And as always, I'm Dr. Bob Rakowski, absolutely knowing that we can all be happy, healthy, and successful. So enjoy this epic, beautiful, healthy day, and God bless.